I have no responsibility for the current pandemic. I have no responsibility for the current.
Stop lying! Stop lying!
I have no responsibility.
Testing 1 2 test 1 2. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show. Just let me get everything set up here, and I'm gonna watch a video right away. Plugging a good guy in the grand scheme of things first, and then we'll pick up where we left off yesterday. Thanks for being here.
When we tour bases, you see pieces of equipment that can be upwards of $2-3 million that will be unused for a year at a time because it's something that we can 3D print for a cost of $2 to $20. The American soldiers see that and they're not able to use it, and that is incredibly demoralizing.
I need your help. We are at a very unique inflection point in the United States where right to repair and right to own can be brought into the public consciousness in a very big way. What I've noticed over the past 13 years is that nobody cares about your problems, and they most certainly don't care about mine. People care about problems when they're personally affected by them. I can talk about right to repair until I'm blue in the face. Nobody gives a shit. I talked to a senator who was told by the Genius Bar they have to spend $900 to fix their computer when the only issue with it is a broken fan, and that's a senator co-sponsoring a right to repair bill. People care about problems when they're personally affected by those problems. And right now, people are being personally affected by those problems that are much more powerful and influential than you or I. That is at the Army and the Navy within the United States, and we are starting to get some traction, not just in the House, but also in the Senate, where people are just listening to these stories and they are aggravated by them. I want you to listen to this piece of testimony while the United States Secretary of the Navy is speaking to the Senate Armed Services Committee.
What we do makes no sense to me, okay? And so I am a huge supporter of right to repair. I went on the Ford carrier. They had 8 ovens. This is a ship that serves 15,300 meals a day. Only 2 were working, 6 were out. And I said, you've got 5,300 people on the ship. You're telling me someone can't fix an oven? We got a lot of engineers. We can, but we need to wait for the contractor to get out. I asked the question about our elevators. If an elevator go out, what happens? We've got to call Huntington. They've got to call the 4 other people. They have to come out and diagnose the problem, and then they'll fix it. It is crazy. We should be able to fix this. We need to really try to ensure going forward we control our IP and we have the ability to fix things, because if we're in a fight, how do we fix it then? Senator, I agree we need to have the right to repair our ship.
Do you support Congress passing a law that will help you negotiate repair rights at a fair and reasonable price?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
You hear the tone in his voice? You hear how much he dislikes this? Now listen to the Secretary of the Army speaking to the House Armed Services Committee.
I kind of talk about this line of effort, which has strong bipartisan support. Monopolies and corporate abuses of power in our defense sector have undermined our military readiness. They have been a prolific driver of waste, fraud, and abuse, and they've really hurt American small businesses. You, Secretary Driscoll, have prioritized one of the most pernicious corporate practices, the monopolization of repair, in the Army Transformation Initiative. You have committed to ensuring that existing or future contract is going to include a right to repair for our military and our service members. Is that right?
Very explicitly, Congresswoman, on a go-forward basis, we have been directed to not sign any contracts that don't give us a right to repair On a go-back basis, we have been directed to go and do what we can to go get that right to repair. And I can say on a personal, how important I think this is. We hope that anyone listening to us who hopes to pitch us a contract going forward will look back at their previous agreements they've signed with us. And if they're unwilling to give us that right to repair, I think we're going to have a hard time negotiating with them. When we tour bases, you see pieces of equipment that can be upwards of $2-3 million that will be unused for a year at a time because it's something that we can 3D print for a cost of $2 to $20. And beyond just the sinfulness of not using that asset, the American soldiers see that and they're not able to use it, and that is incredibly demoralizing. And so this is a virtuous cycle that I think benefits us in a lot of ways.
And can you commit that you'll work with this committee on a bipartisan basis to codify a right to repair for our military and service members?
I can commit that it is an incredibly important topic, and I would do whatever I can personally and in this role to help.
I like what they're trying to do. Now, this is something that we had actually tried to do many, many times. I've brought up this issue of military right to repair back in 2019, 2021, 2023, and earlier this year. But we're finally starting to get some traction here.
Sorry about that. Now, the reason why I'm doing this video is because I really like this guy. And I just want to promote Lewis and his work, and I respect what he's done. But I don't think he sees that actually he's fighting against exactly the same kind of a theater that we are facing with the pandemic, but on a much smaller and more micro scale, because it only requires a few people to perform in order for him to feel like something's happening and people are listening and there was a hearing and stuff like that. But he doesn't seem to realize that this lack of progress is built into the system. It's by design. There, he's being undermined. Now, if that happens on such a scale as this, on an issue like this, understand one thing and one thing very clearly. If it wasn't for this one guy from New York making a YouTube channel about repairing MacBooks, none of what you just saw would even be happening. None of the theater of, oh, right to repair is something that we care about and our military should fight for it, after the whole, how much of the deficit that America is supposedly in is a result of the absolute incompetence with which our DOD has been run for the last 40 years. How is it possible that there are people on the internet that are claiming that the COVID vaccine and the COVID narrative and the whole COVID operation was in a US DOD operation? Like, that doesn't even make any sense in an organization that's so screwed up that they can't even fix their own ovens on a ship. They can't fix their own elevators on a ship. I mean, this guy is one of the only Americans fighting for this. And if it wasn't for him, this whole issue would disappear. And the whole theater in the government wouldn't even be happening. And that one representative might be the only person who's doing anything to respond to Lewis. And other than that, those two people, it's it. And what I am imploring you to understand is that besides Mark and I and maybe Joe Marshall, there's nobody else on the internet that is trying to move the ball forward with respect to the murder and lies that were committed in America in order to bamboozle the world about the existence of and the necessary responses to a global RNA pandemic. It's the same nonsense, and it's an emergency, just like you hear in the background. There should be sirens on all the time, because this theater has now become so macabre and so malevolent that they have a whole cadre of theatrical performers on the internet that are there to assure that the useful resistance to the mythologies that they use to govern us never, ever amount to anything. Much in the same way that they have successfully neutralized this dude. And what you see here is the result of only one dude. If it wasn't for this one dude, there'd be nothing. about right to repair. I assure you, there'd be nothing. This guy's YouTube channel is the only reason why any of that shit's going through. And it might not go through, and then he'll whine about it for another 5 years because he's that committed. And that's why I think he's worth promoting. Because if people believe what they say, their action should belie that. And what's happening in the health freedom movement right now is a bunch of people are talking all kinds of shit. And they've been talking it for a very long time, but it doesn't seem like the stuff that comes out of their mouth is congruent with the stuff that their body does, with the stuff that they put in their slide decks, with the actions that they've taken over the past 10 or 15 years. This guy's track record of unblemished integrity is there on the internet to see. This guy's been fighting. His arguments have evolved. His understanding of the issue has evolved. And his narrowing it down to very small talking points has really made him annoying to them. And so I promote Lewis. I think you should support Lewis. And if you believe in what he's fighting for, which is freedom, not indentured servitude, like you buy something but it's not really yours, that's the model that would otherwise be already the default if it wasn't for this one dude. And if it wasn't for Mark Kulak, none of us would know anything about Robert Malone. If it wasn't for Mark Kulak, none of us would know who Hillary Kaprowski was in a useful way. None of us would know who Joshua Lederberg is in a useful way. And if it wasn't for me, there'd be almost no one on the internet usefully questioning both the Scooby-Doo, which is the trick about a lab leak cover-up, and the theater surrounding that to make as many people as possible to believe that that's not only possible, that's probably what happened, and so we should put Fauci in jail. But also this little nonsense cadre over here that says there are no viruses at all, without backing it up with a alternative model of understanding most of what we know of biology, but just in a different way. The only one who's even attempted to do that, that's still alive and kicking, is me. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn. What I'm trying to do is show you how desperate the situation is. You want to go right to repair on social media? This is your guy. There's nobody else. He defined the movement. You want to go anti-COVID, anti-pandemic narrative? I'm the only guy you got. Everybody else is in on it. I'll let Lewis continue.
This was from the Secretary of the Army a few months ago. This is in a memo. It says, identify and propose contract modifications for right to repair provisions. And there's also a bill that has recently been brought up. This, unfortunately, I believe, had a no vote on it. This didn't really go anywhere. This was in December of 2024. However, we are going to be getting a new one soon. This is something that I'm very, very happy about because there's a lot of waste in the military budget when it comes to right to repair or just in being able to source things in general. 7,493% markup on a soap dispenser, $71 for a pin. There are two senators that could not be further opposites from each other, Tim Sheehy and Elizabeth Warren, and they are going to be proposing a bipartisan bill that I would like to get some support behind, because if we can get right to repair in the military, then maybe it's easier to start shifting the culture and getting more people to understand the issue and actually start getting right to repair for normal devices. This is a sad article. The inside story of how the Navy spent billions on a little crappy ship. Like, this is... It's just bad. It's all bad. I would like to see this bill gain some traction because I'm a taxpayer, which means I don't like seeing the military budget go up by $300 billion and not having a clue what the hell we're getting for it. And B, I like the idea of being able to fix what we bought and paid for. If people that are in wheelchairs can fix their stuff, if people that fix medical devices can fix their stuff, if people that are on farms can fix tractors, if people can fix their military equipment, it all bodes better for right to repair as a whole. At the end of the day, we're all under the same umbrella and we're all getting fucked. If I stop my brother from getting screwed, I too one day may stop getting screwed. That's the way I see it. If If you take a look, this is going to be a bit of an uphill battle. It's going to require some convincing, because when you see the people donating to the politicians on these armed services committees, we got Lockheed Martin, need I say more? Some of the names you may not be familiar with: Huntington Ingalls, primary builder of U.S. Navy aircraft carriers and submarines, which you may have heard the Secretary of the Navy mention there. Seaman Composites, manufacturer of advanced composites for U.S. military vessels. General Dynamics, top UF5 U.S. defense contractors. APAC, I'm not even gonna fucking get into that one in this video. Needless to say, they are gonna need some convincing if they are going to vote yes on this. And at the end of the day, no matter how much money they get towards their re-election campaign from these companies, they don't get voted into office unless you vote for them. So what I would like you all to do, if you could help me, go to the video description, scroll down. You're gonna see a list of names, and then you're gonna see URLs to how you can contact them. What you're gonna do is you're gonna go, do I live in any of these states? If you do, you click. B, you are going to then take their contact information. And then C, you are going to write them something. You are going to say something along the lines of this: Dear Senator whatever the hell, I believe in right to repair. Right to repair says that you should be able to fix what you bought and paid for. This is being taken away everywhere. I can't fix what I bought and paid for, and now the military can't either. We don't like fraud, waste, and abuse. We are trying to find ways to cut down on fraud, waste, and abuse. Being able to fix things means not wasting billions of dollars on things that are not working. I would like to see right to repair for the military. I believe in this. Kindly let me know how you will be voting on this 1 or 2 months from now when a bill comes out, so that I know how to vote in the next primary or general election. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. I'm not going to give you a copy and paste thing, because if I do, it's going to look like 50 or 1,000 people all wrote the same thing, which then begs the question of whether you're bots or somebody else is just telling you to say something rather than you believing in it. You need to write it for yourself. And frankly, if you've been watching this channel for 12 years, you should know what to say. It doesn't have to be genius. It doesn't have to be 8 pages. Just something very simple. I am a voter in your district. I believe in right to repair. I do not like to see that the military is getting screwed in this way. I see that there is a right to repair bill coming up. I would like to know how you are voting. I hope you vote yes. Signed, a voter. I'm going to ask you to do that for me, because that's the only way that this is going to get any better. Something I've noticed, and I know a lot of people are going to say, push back, but it is true. Politicians will actually vote the way that their constituents want them to vote. The problem is that nobody shows up and tells them this, so they just don't care. Most of the right to repair hearings I've been to, there's 2 people there. There's like me, Nathan Proctor, and one other dude. And sometimes there's nobody there to begin with. So when you have 15 lobbyists that show up that explain why it is they should not do something, and they are coming from all of these different groups because they are very well organized. And then you have us with nobody who shows up, who do you think wins? Look at the lies that they are telling here. Like one of the things that I found interesting. Section 828 will require contractors to provide repair materials at prices equivalent to the most favorable prices offered by the manufacturer's authorized dealers, including all discounts and rebates. Many large OEMs do not sell parts directly, but rather rely on authorized dealers to serve customers in their local communities. Section 828's price mandates on OEMs would ultimately fall on these dealers, significantly altering the economics of the dealer distribution model by effectively eliminating dealer margins. This would harm the network of manufacturers and authorized dealers, many of whom are small and medium-sized businesses that the department ultimately relies on, compromising the very readiness this provision is ostensibly intended to enhance. This is complete bullshit. When I talk about what the issues are in my industry, I don't want to pay $1,000 for a motherboard. I want to pay $15 for the broken chip. When I pay $15 for the broken chip, Mouser, who has bought that chip for $1 from Texas Instruments, is happy to sell it to me for $15 because they're making $15. Texas Instruments, who's making that chip for 2 cents, is happy to sell it to Mouser.com for $1 because that means that they have just made 1,000% profit. It is very, very simple for there to be a supply chain where people are making money and people are able to fix their products. Most likely, they are lying. And if they are not lying, that means that we have a completely fucked supply chain that needs to change. I guarantee you, the more that you dig into any of these individual issues and investigate them, you will find fraud, waste, abuse, and bullshit. The next thing I'm going to ask you is if you are a member of the military that has experience with how any of these repair issues have affected readiness, email me. youtube@rossmangroup.com. I'm going to include the email down below. I'm going to ask for information from you because I'm going to want to write up articles on this. Pushing this forward is going to help a group of people that are also going to be able to help me when it comes to other right to repair and right to own issues that I bring up on this channel. The Fulu Foundation that I announced starting in this video is a foundation that's looking to restore ownership. There are laws in this country that make it illegal to break a lock in what you bought and paid for, a digital lock. That is insane. There should not be digital locks on what you bought and paid for, and if there are, you should have the ability and the right to reverse engineer those locks and get around them, because that is freedom. We don't have that freedom right now. It's a freedom that's been taken away from us. And I'm working as hard as I can to get that freedom back, which means making friends with people who are like-minded, who want to do this type of stuff. Now, I know what some of you are going to say. Elizabeth Warren, Tim Sheehy, I don't like it. I don't give a fuck what you like, bro. I don't fucking care. The military budget goes up 20 to 50 billion fucking dollars every year. And what do we get for it? Nothing. We get broken shit while military contractors get richer and richer off of the backs of ordinary, average, everyday taxpayers. It's bullshit. Do you want to cry about the fact that you don't like the person writing the bill? Or do you want to help us fix it? These two politicians could not be at each other's throats over more issues if they tried. But they are coming together here because it doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum in the United States of America or the world. You know that a 7,000% markup on a soap dispenser is bullshit. You know that you should not have a ship that serves food to over 5,000 people that has over 70% of its stoves out of order. That's insane. The same thing that I've been talking about on this channel when it comes to cell phones and MacBooks and everything else is a microcosm of what's been happening in the overall world. And I want to try and do something about it. Since starting this new Fulu Foundation that I talked about here, we're not just going over right to repair. We're going over right to own. We're going at the heart of laws that make it illegal to break a digital lock in which you bought and paid for. Something that just makes me sick. The idea that reverse engineering or math can be illegal. There's a lot of work that we have to do over the next 5 to 6 years if we're truly going to get ownership back as a society, culturally and legislatively, which means making friends with people who are doing this type of work so that they are going to help us when we need it.
I understand that he does have a cat, okay, and that's not necessarily great. I have a friend in the chat named Jeff from Earth. He also has a cat that he's kind of enthusiastic about. I forgive him every day for that. So I also forgive Lewis for this. It's not bad. Cats aren't necessarily bad. They're just, I don't know. They're not dogs.
So do me a favor. Put down your aggravation with the names of the individual politicians. Put down your cynicism that everything is pointless and there's no point in even bothering. Because you thinking there's no point in even bothering is why you don't show up. You not showing up is why your neighbor doesn't show up. Your neighbor not showing up is why everybody else doesn't show up. And when all of you don't show up, you know who does? Advamed, all these other motherfuckers, and you know what they do? They win. So you're going to go into the video description. You're going to ask yourself, do I live in the state of any of these politicians? If you do, you're going to click onto the website. After you do that, you're going to find their contact info. You're going to call them. You're going to leave them a voicemail. You're going to write them a letter.
So what I'm saying is that it's always about hurting cats. He shows you that list of organizations. That's no different than the list of organizations that I show you that are supposedly part of this health freedom movement. Louis Rossman's a good guy. He's been working on something I think's worth working on. He stumbled into it and it's become his life's work. I wish him all the best. I hope he succeeds in all of his endeavors. We need more people like him, more people like an independent Brightweb.
I'll see you all in the next video. Bye now.
I don't care how you get there. I don't care what you do to get there. The goal is to win.
What time is it? Game time! Woo!
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show. This is Gigaohm Biological, a high-resistance, low-noise information brief brought to you by a biologist. Very happy to be here today. Trying not to interrupt your rhythm too much. I need to be out of here by 12:30 on the button. So I'm going to work hard to get there, and I hope that will make everything efficient for you too. Don't forget, our main goal here is to ultimately get off of social media. I love your cats too. Don't worry, I'm just teasing you.
Tradition, we will not call autism.
Brian.
I don't like the word autism.
Brian.
He was vaccine damaged.
Brian. I know. Intramuscular injection is something we should question as a methodology. Virology is definitely something we should question as a science, and public health is definitely almost never a good reason for anything. And yet, from autism spectrum disorder to pandemics to gain of function, These myths are used to make sure that we never question intramuscular injection virology or public health. And if you don't understand why the cheese is free on social media, then you probably believe a lot of these things. I don't know what to say other than the only way out is biology and getting off of that whole military social control suite. This is the biology that they ignore. Welcome to the show. I want to give a special shout out to my friend Mark Kulak, who made a really wonderful program yesterday. I really think this guy's work is top notch, and I really think his website archive is second to none. I think that work itself represents something that I just think needs to be admired. I also want to give a special shout out to this Substack, Biology Phenom, at Substack.com. I really like this Substack a lot. This is the Substack which has been keeping track of the craziness in Scotland that everyone seems to ignore, including all these people in the UK. It's remarkable. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. Biology is the way, and I'm really, really excited that my voice is feeling a little better. I don't know if it's the 4 liters of honey I drank last night or what it is. This is a message that if you've been hearing it for a while, you're here at the top of the wave. If not, you might need to be coached how to stay focused on the biology and not take their bait on social media, and to love your neighbor. Skilled TV watchers are lost. Skilled social media users could, in theory, still be saved. But how this is working is that there are a few people that put their money where their mouth is, so to speak, and have supported this stream in a very generous way, from $10 a month all the way up to hundreds of dollars a month. It's remarkable. We even have a couple supporters that have given us, some of whom continue to give us. It's crazy. We are a very grateful family of 5 renting our house in Pittsburgh, and so the way this works is that viewers are spreading the word every week, and people that are moved by our biology are supporting the work. The voice that you hear is that of Jonathan Cooey. I'm Chief Biologist at Gigaohm Biological. I'm coming to you live out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the back of my garage. You can find some of my work on the Substack called Woodhouse 76. You can find some of my work on the National Library of Medicine website PubMed. You can find some of my work and quotes in the Wuhan Cover-Up book, a book written by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Health and Human Services Secretary of the United States of America. You can find an article or two that I contributed to at Children's Health Defense in their Defender website. And I used to be buddies with Jay Bhattacharya, but he doesn't really, I don't know, I guess I've said too much. Anyway, you can also find my original YouTube channel on YouTube, JC on a Bike, where you can see all the trouble I got into as a biking faculty member of the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. Then you can find my JC in the Woods channel, where I am live right now. That's the only place where I'm allowed to be live. I'm kind of just trying to stay under the radar there on YouTube. So if you need to watch on YouTube, there is a place to do it. If you want to support the work, you can go to gigaohmbiological.com, where you can also find links to everything else, including all the stuff that we've been distributing and encouraging people to start reading so that we can make some serious progress in understanding a new Biology 101. That would be the link stuff there in the corner. Also at the bottom, I put it in a number of places. If you scroll down, there's a schedule we're going to start following pretty soon. Links to all the places where we're streaming, and then, of course, links, different ways to support. Thank you very much for maybe even thinking about doing that. So yeah, this is Gigaohm Biological. Why don't I hear that? Oh, there it is. Yeah, welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. I'll click over here and say good morning. People's brains are broken from 6+ years of military-grade cognitive dissonance. There's no question about it. We've been blasted by it. I'm coming to you, Team USA here. I'm really bummed. This is a legit Team USA practice jersey, not from the original Dream Team, but from like a year or 2 later. And as I put it on, the champion logo came off, and It was ironed on, I guess. And I can show you it's actually real because there's a Champion logo on the yellow side too. And for you kids out there who don't know who Champion is, they used to make the best stuff. Their sweatshirts and their sweatpants were thick and soft and they were tasty. And so yeah, this is legit old school 90s stuff. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. This is Gigaohm Biological. We're coming to you live as a Team USA kind of thing, in the sense of I'm trying to get more Americans on the page of there isn't a good team and a worse team. There isn't a okay team and a bad team. There's not, a white nationalist team and a rainbow team. This theater has fractured America in a way where if you're not willing to try and find Team USA, then you're already lost. And that's really the truth. I grew up in a time in America where there was a Team USA that was not questioned, a Team USA that everybody was behind, when racism wasn't really a thing anymore, and where telling your preferences or your sexual desires to everybody as the opening pitch of who you are would just have been ridiculous. And now I live in an America where that's not the case, and I think all of these things are different facets of the illusion that we need to shatter. And the way that I want to shatter it is a lot of times trying to go back in time to when things were different in America. And one of the ways to do that is go back and think about, if you're old enough, think about how America thought about the Dream Team. And what America was talking about when the Dream Team was assembled and went over. What was the point of taking pictures and putting them on the cover of Sports Illustrated of like white guys and black guys playing together? What did it mean? Did they talk about, was there any white or black problems on the Dream Team? Were they worried about whether or not the racist guy from Indiana was going to be, able to play with the guys from? Now they would. Now they would be worried about that. Now they would be worried about whether or not we had to have a trans male or a trans female or whatever they call them nowadays on the team. Which one's gay? Are there any gay guys on there? I don't know what to say, ladies and gentlemen, but we've got to wake ourselves up, and then we've got to wake our children up. Some of the illusions that they have cast upon us, enchantments that we have accepted, include this idea of endemicity, the idea that an RNA molecule could go from a mud puddle to everywhere in the world and then just kind of perpetually be there in the background forever. That's an illusion. And the weird thing about it is that illusion can't be dispelled unless you understand that it can't be proven. Because there's no way to prove that something went endemic if you have no evidence of it being absent before you found it. And so a background signal with non-specific PCR tests could be called endemicity, and the process and endpoint could become real if you believe that enchantment. But if you understand that there's an irreducibly complex background of genetic signals, and on that background they rolled out ridiculously useless tests under the pretense of an emergency and using EUA authorizations that only Kevin McKernan whined about in 2020 on obscure podcasts only. And here we are, 6 years later, using their tests still to find their ghosts and calling ourselves Ghostbusters, chasing the variants around as if we're watching evolution in real time. And so this illusion and mythology of endemicity was then weaponized in the form of a pandemic. And in order to make sure that the mythology of pandemics is passed on to our children, they even put together a very elaborate anti-vaccine movement in America. They even killed some people in America to make sure that at the start of the pandemic, there would be no useful resistance to this concept. And that's really what this is supposed to portray, is the idea that you could take a background signal and change it into a red one, if you make them equivalent with a PCR test. Now, the most important thing to understand is that if you look at the population pyramid of the United States when I graduated from college, in 1994, failed to get into medical school and started teaching high school, you can see the expected rise in all-cause mortality coming. You can see an easily anticipatable rise in all-cause mortality right here. It's the people that are just, like at this time, are about 10 years older than me. The kids of the baby boomers, the real kids of the baby boomers, right? These people right here. And if we let this play, you will see very clearly that it's an anticipatable rise in all-cause mortality. And this anticipated rise in all-cause mortality was timed perfectly with this claim of a novel virus. This claim that we could track something in the background that we had no idea was there, but now we're tracking it because now we know it's there. It was timed perfectly with this. And that's how malevolent this is, because it was timed to manage a problem they saw coming. That's why they needed so many people in place. And you can see it. You can see it very clearly in the slope of this graph. You can see very clearly they didn't need to murder very many people. You can see that they lost control of pneumonia, lost control. And then they got it back. Look at the bright red. It's an anticipated rise in all-cause mortality that was sculpted using murder and sophisticated lies. And now Brett Weinstein is talking about narrative sculpting. Just like Jay Bhattacharya a couple years ago started a blog with some Canadian guy that he met through Brett Weinstein, and he called his blog, Illusion of Consensus. Ladies and gentlemen, there is an illusion of consensus that this list doesn't matter. There's an illusion of consensus that murder didn't happen. There's an illusion of consensus that there was a novel virus that was weird and made weird symptoms, including cardiac symptoms and other kinds of symptoms. And all of these people are testifying to the existence of the novel virus, despite the fact that the math doesn't seem to leave any room for a novel virus. The only people who seem to provide evidence for the novel virus are all listed on the early COVID survivors list that Mark Kulak put together. It is remarkable because every one of these people has a track record. Every one of these people has a calendar that you can put together, and you can see whether or not they had principles, because right here in the timeline that I'm looking at right now, right here is where the murder started. Right here is where the murder was the worst. Right here is where the murder ended. My intellectual progression from the beginning of the pandemic to now included thinking it was a lab leak, included thinking they were covering it up. But by the time the main peak of murder was happening, I was saying that they were lying about a background. They were misconstruing a background as spread. And so this is really nasty. I wasn't using the word murder yet, but I definitely was saying that they are just misconstruing a background as spread in order to justify the rollout of transfection, and calling that a vaccine was a crime. The intellectual progression of somebody like Mary Holland. Right? That's what we have there.
I have no
Oh
responsibility.
man, it's not working again. I don't know why this doesn't work. If I have to update it or what. It always is running through the sounds now. Equipment is lame. See, it's still running through the sound. You should be queued up. I guess I can hit Q, but that's double pushing then.
The current.
Yeah, that's lame. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. I gotta not worry about the technical stuff. So yeah, we really have to consider everybody now, and we cannot not look back, because that's what they want us to do. They don't want us to look back on the murder. They don't want us to figure it out. And I'm getting more and more worried that the Grace Shara story is going to be an anecdotal one, and that none of these doctors are going to be able to usefully turn around Grace Shara as an example of what they need to check and make sure didn't happen to anybody else. That the very simple parts of that protocol and any variant of it didn't happen to anybody else, but instead it's going to be like, oh, at least we got justice for Grace, which I think we need. But if that doesn't mean that every case in the hospitals in 2020 gets reopened and re-examined for the possibility of intentional euthanasia, that's how we got here. We're on a script from these guys. The only one that would write the words intentional euthanasia are people like Robert Malone, the bioethicist expert. The only one who would say that combination of words is somebody as malevolent as Kevin McKernan, or maybe Steve Bannon. That combination of words would even be somewhat contradictory to someone as boneheaded as Brett Weinstein, although I bet he'd use those words if he was scripted to. I can't believe that Mary Talley Bowden went on Joe Rogan and used those words, intentionally euthanized. That's a doctor who apparently doesn't understand basic bioethics and doesn't understand the definition of basic words that are kind of crucial to the bioethics of being a doctor. What a tremendous failure. What a tremendous failure, an opportunity for Joe Rogan to be like, I thought that euthanasia required informed consent, but if Grace Shara's dad didn't know, and his family didn't know that they were going to do it, then and nobody gave permission. I'm just thinking out loud here, but doesn't that mean that it was murder?
Now, what we do have evidence for are these plasmids are in there without any question now. This has been replicated in many places around the world, and there are consequences for having these residual pieces of DNA left inside the vaccines that we're going to touch on. This is not conspiracy theory. This has been published in the BMJ by Retzef Levy, and they go through this process where they ran these vaccines in the trial.
Okay, I'm gonna even have to start this over. But okay, first of all, realize this is just a clip taken out of a recent interview. You can see it's a recent interview because one of the worst Americans alive, Kevin McKernan, has now grown a beard. So he's hard to distinguish from Andy Kaufman, except he's a little more overweight than Andy Kaufman. They all look the same nowadays. Anyway, this poser and I would say career liar at this point, working against the American public to make sure that the Human Genome Project is never understood to be behind the COVID-19 pandemic narrative and never understood to still be going on as we speak. And actually the motivation for making all these data centers that everybody's all excited about, the military building data centers, the NSA building data centers, the government building data centers with Larry Ellison, the guy who ran Oracle and donated to Stanford, where Stanford has an internet observatory funded by Palantir. All of that stuff, that guy works for them. And we have been bamboozled by him for 5 years plus on the right side of America. And the left side of America's never heard of this guy, and they're about to. If the plan that I think is about to happen happens, they're about to hear about him. That's why he grew his beard. The idea is to make sure that he's ready for prime time. And the prime time is about the DNA. It's not going to be about the fact that the RNA was never pure. It's not going to be about the fact that tiny RNAs have all kinds of biological consequences. It's not going to be about the fact that the endotoxins are also impossible to remove from the manufacturing of mRNA through process 1 or process 2 with the use of recombinant DNA and bacteria to manufacture the RNA. That's process 2. Process 1 is making pure RNA through this RNA printing thing that I talked to you about before. So as I told you before, the whole point of bringing up process 1 and process 2 in this particular interview is what I predicted at least 3 years ago. That they're going to show you that there was an alternative, and the alternative was better. But unfortunately, Pfizer decided that when the DoD ordered 10 billion doses that they couldn't make it with process 1. So they used process 2, and they were very naughty for not telling us that they were going to use process 2. And process 2 is where the DNA comes from. And I did predict this 3 years ago. I scripted this out 3 years ago. It had to be what they were going to do. I just didn't know how they were going to do it. Now, the interesting thing is what paper is he promoting? He's promoting a paper by a guy that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. just put on the ACIP, just promoted to the ACIP, a MIT professor, where also Steve Kirsch is from, and where also Stephanie Seneff is from, where also he is from, where also Rodney Mullen is from, and also where the guy who does gene drives is from, that nobody talks about as if gene drives are nothing. We don't have to worry about them. Gain-of-function viruses and supply chains and seed oils are what we got to worry about. And Callie and Casey Means being at the Surgeon General position is just, it's crazy. So he's never going to tell you that the purification of biologics is a standard procedure that couldn't be applied. There are many methodologies for making proteins pure when you're making a biologic that you couldn't apply to the RNA, hence they couldn't apply to the RNA like ever. They didn't figure that out during the pandemic. They've known that for decades. That's one of the reasons why process 2 using it would have been bad. He's trying to say that they didn't know that. Of course they knew that. They knew that from the very beginning. And using process 2 results in an RNA that isn't pure. All kinds of small fragmented RNAs that he came to my stream and talked to me about at the end of 2021, a couple weeks before Charles Rixey came to my house. The endotoxins are also something he talked about on my stream, but it's not going to say anymore because that would all reveal that process 2 was already a standard way to make these things. You know, what a lot of virologists call infectious clones. Just large, pure quantities of DNA or RNA that you can transfect a cell culture with and call virology. All of these illusions are connected, and all of these lies must have the spectacular commitment of Kevin McKernan, the only guy who can really walk on this thin of ice. Because one wrong move, and suddenly you realize that every academic in America that was worth their salt knew what transformation and transfection was. Many of them were already using adenovirus-driven vectors to do optogenetics in their animals. Many of them were already transforming their cells to create proteins or to apply proteins or to overexpress proteins. And so they were told that this was a new thing. Robert Malone and Peter Cullis and all these people assured us that this was a new thing, when it was no different than the product lipofectamine, with fancier ways of shaking the bottle or drying them out. Because lipid nanoparticles are nothing new, and the dangers of them aren't anything new either. And it's a compound problem. It's not just the DNA. It's not just process 1 or process 2. The ultimate problem is that all of these jackasses knew this before the pandemic, and that's the reason why the pandemic narrative had to exist in the first place, because otherwise there would have been no excuses to forget or to imagine that these things aren't true. You know, it's a new thing, this technology that had never been tried. Isn't that what Mary Holland says repeatedly? These are all coordinated liars on the same provided script. And the only people who are sophisticated enough in their understanding to stay on that script without a lot of help or a lot of guardrails are Robert Malone and Kevin McKernan. That's why Jessica Rose only talks about VAERS. That's why Matt Crawford only talks about Scientology. That's the reason why Charles Rixey only talks in Excel files. That's the reason why all of these people have a single little thing that they stick to but never progress on.
and how they changed that when they decided to go and inject the rest of the world. This is traditionally a mortal sin in vaccine manufacturing or in any sort of biologic manufacturing. The process is the product. You change the process, you have to go through trials again. And the EMA even asked them to do that, although they failed to. They asked for another trial of 250 people once they changed the process, and that data was never delivered. So this bait and switch is very important for you to understand why the trial data is of absolute...
The bait and switch is important for you to understand as a bullshit story to make sure that you don't understand that this liar, traitor to our grandchildren, could have told you all of this in 2020 and could have actually taken the risk that would have belied having principles that a patriot would have. But instead, this mealy-mouthed poser was arguing that the FDA was in the way of proper PCR testing and that the WHO had distributed a PCR test that was bullshit and that's not fair because they got peer review in 24 hours and it's not fair. The FDA's lame. This man is a criminal, and once the American public understands the lies that he told in 2020 and how his logical progression belies that he is a state actor, they'll want him in jail too.
Zero consequence to what we're actually seeing in the field. Those numbers are a caricature of what they're actually doing with these injections.
And so he's a liar, and he's going on doing the same lies that include, of course, promoting clowns and promoting clown ideas.
And then there are people who have inspired a lot of thought for me, people like J.J. Cooey, you know.
This is the voice of Nick Hudson, who I also think is on Team Robert Malone. My best evidence I have for that is that he lost the 3 presentations that I gave to Panda and never posted them on their Rumble channel, and instead has taken all that information and tried to pretend it's his or theirs. Perhaps his worst sort of anecdotal story is that he got invited to go on a cruise off of the coast of Turkey with Robert Malone and his wife in 2022. And after he came back from that cruise, he tried to convince me that Robert Malone and his wife were good guys because they were fighting the whole time they were on that boat, and there's no way that they could be operators, otherwise they would have never done that. So as far as I can tell, they're just good guys. And I laughed at him. And then Jessica Hockett was called in, and Jonathan Engler was called in, and Professor Martin Neal was called in, and I was supposed to write some kind of Substack with them because they really like me. And they wasted another year of my time. When I had already had it down to like 15 words. Population pyramids are real. That's a pretty big signal. RNA can't pandemic because there's no biological evidence for that bullshit. Intramuscular injections are not medicine because there's no real biological evidence that that bullshit works. And transfection is a crime because it's an old, dated methodology that is used so widely in academia that no one should have taken this seriously except for the fact that they put all these liars out on the internet and called it new gene therapy. And so yesterday I watched these 2 poor excuses for men. I watched a little bit and I showed you how they danced around the transfection. They danced around the population. But the video gets worse. So I want to watch a little bit more of it, but I'm going to take it out of this context. I'm going to put it in VLC directly and play it faster. And just take a few notes and make sure that you digest exactly how malevolent and, more importantly, exactly how many admissions are made in this podcast, because there is so much in this podcast that is a consequence of what I'm doing or what Mark Kulak is doing, just like the work of Louis Rossmann is making lawmakers do things and making lawmakers perform in Congress. These people are being made to perform by me. They are being made to perform by their handlers because of me. There are table meetings that are occurring only because of Mark, only because of me. Everybody else is nothing. Everybody else is their tool. Everybody else is working on their team. This guy might be unwitting. He might be that soft. But think about this for a second. I didn't know this when I first watched him. He's from Scotland, where they murdered people in 2020, in 2021, in 2022, in order to convince the rest of the world that there was a pandemic, in order to convince the rest of the world that it was worth taking the risk of transfection or maybe ivermectin. They murdered people in Scotland, like really, really murdered them. And there's testimony of it. And nobody cares. Nobody in the UK media, nobody in the alternative media. Scotland is one of the best examples of a population pyramid that was cut off at the top on purpose and then shown to the rest of the world as evidence of a pandemic. And the fact that these two monsters never even got there in their 2-hour discussion is just so gross. It makes me want to puke. So I'm going to put this up anyway because I really think this is work we have to do. I'm sorry. I know it's not the best work, but it is work we have to do. Where did I download this thing? What? Where did it go? Did I put it in the wrong hole here? Sorry, I will find it in a second. Maybe I still have it in the downloads. It's got to be in this one. Why isn't it here? Oh, I must have downloaded it. There it is. Sorry. Gotcha.
Hey, folks. Welcome to the Dark Horse Podcast Inside Rail. I have the distinct pleasure of sitting with my good friend Neil Oliver this morning. Well, for him, it's this afternoon. Neil, for those who don't know him, by training is an archaeologist. He's probably better known these days as the Coast Guy. He hosts a program on GB News in Great Britain. In any case, Neil, welcome to Dark Horse.
It's lovely to be with you. I always enjoy our conversations. My only regret is that they don't happen often enough.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm very glad to have you back on. Of course, this is a moment at which things are going so well on planet Earth that there's probably not that much for us to talk about.
Jobs are good.
Yeah, right.
This episode of the Dark Horse Inside Rail is sponsored by Bandman. We absolutely adore the line of Bandman. This will also be
Where do you think we are relative to the crises that we were so concerned with in the last several years and anything new that has arisen?
I think it's been deliberately attritional. I feel a certain fatigue, a general exhaustion, not least because I think a couple of years into, let's say that this kicked off for me around 2020, a couple of years into
so
it, I felt as if...
he seems already to be aware of the phenomenon that Mark and I have been pushing, that they're running out the clock. But the question is, what are they running the clock out on? And this traitor to Scotland, if he had his eyes open or he took his head out of the holes that it's been in for the last 5 years, he would know that in Scotland people were murdered. And that if we don't get justice for those people now, but wait for 5 more years or 10 more years, they will never get justice. Their relatives will never get. This is what's happening. This guy is from Scotland, where they murdered old people in a way that they did it in few other countries. Scotland, it's been brought to a immigration crisis state. A lot of their elders are gone because of murder, and this dude is not going to make any useful progress in understanding how they might have been murdered, by supplementary oxygen leading to a pneumonia that was viral, so we can't use antibiotics. We have a way to get justice for Scotland. There is a blog that he should have plugged the moment that he got on. Brett, I just want you to be sure you're aware that in Scotland, like in few other places in the West, people were murdered. But he didn't. That makes him wittingly or unwittingly complicit in that murder. He's awful.
Solutions were crystallizing a little. I felt as if enough people might be drawing conclusions that were close enough that we might affect change. I thought that there might be consequences for things that had been done. I thought lessons might have been learned. I thought there might have been a commitment never to allow certain things to happen again. But there has been an incessant barrage of crises. The thing that was sold to us as a pandemic, then morphed into war in Europe, was then bloodied, in the most horrifying terms by what happened in Israel and Gaza, and is continuing to happen in Gaza, the horror there. And people also, at the same time, because of things as banal in a sense as cost of living crises.
That is remarkable, because again, his imprecision, it shows how overwhelming this has been for everybody. And I'm not saying that he's wittingly on a script right here. I think this is exactly how he feels. It's just too much for me. My heart is collapsing. It's just too much for me. I don't know what to care more about. And that is definitely by design. But I'm going to give you some, I think you should care more about the murder that happened in your country. You should care more about the murder that happened to people around you in the system that you're in, because you have more responsibility to them, both for letting it happen and for advocating for justice now, than you do for what's happening in Israel, for example. Is what's happening in Israel and in Iran tragic? Is yes, of course it is. And we can find individual stories in all places, under all myths and under all narratives that are tragic. But American history being contorted and distorted into a history that, if you don't understand it, will result in everyone rejecting the idea, is a disaster. And it appears to be that these people in the UK, these weirdos that everybody is promoting, they seem to all have that idea. That Great Britain and America, if that's the way that the world needs to see it, is responsible for what's happening in Israel because we give them money, because we give them stuff, because they buy stuff from us. I know it's all real. But they want you to believe that that's the same kind of incompetence and evil and malevolence that brought us the gain-of-function virus that killed millions of people, that gave them the excuse to roll out a shitty transfection. Hopefully they'll fix it the next time around. But goodness sakes, we better regulate gain-of-function virus research. And goodness sakes, can we get on to solving the problem in Iran? Or are they going to get nuclear weapons? Or are they just making nuclear fuel for China? Are they just providing oil to China? And we don't like that. So we're going to use the excuse that we had already 15 years ago, which is Iran is 3 years from a bomb. Oh, no, wait, maybe it's 17 months or 14 months, but they're almost there. I think Mark's analysis was dead on balls accurate. I thought it was a great show.
Inflation, increased taxation, people are finding it harder and harder just to keep their heads above water, far less to contemplate looking at the bigger picture, which I understand because I feel it myself. But I feel a certain despondency, if not hopelessness, that wrongs that were committed in the past and for which there is now such ample evidence, no consequences.
He's still talking about the people as though he's not a part of the people, but he does feel it because he feels it too. It's a very, very important thing to hear there. He's talking to Brett like he's one of the same group that Brett is. He's talking about the people, that's us, as somebody else, and they're under a lot of pressure. But I feel it too.
And likewise, the bigger picture about, say, war in Ukraine is there for anyone that wants to spend a couple of minutes getting a backstory on what continues to happen in Ukraine. And yet nothing changes. Nothing changes. And I feel...
So is it really? Is the truth of Ukraine really just available with a few clicks? Is the truth about Israel available in a few clicks? Is the truth about the pandemic available in a few clicks? Does he really believe that? Because that is the most naive statement I've ever heard.
Certain kind of existential fatigue, I think, is my answer to your question.
He's looking down over there. He might be on a script after all. Wow.
Yeah, I feel that fatigue too, and I think I infer from your answer that you feel that the fatigue is intentional, that the idea is to get us to tune out because it's just too exhausting to try to track the morphing crisis through all of its various incarnations.
Exactly that. I think we're almost. I feel as if we're almost at a point. I've been describing it recently as just like living with organized crime.
I think this is literally accurate.
I just feel that for people like me, I just thought we lived in a rules-based society, if not a rules-based world, and we're thinking
a rules-based order. Is that something I've heard other people say before? What a weird choice of language.
That you oughtn't to do, and if you transgressed it from highest to lowest, richest to poorest, powerful to powerless, if you did certain things, there'd be consequences. And now, evidently, all that's happening is that the drugs running, the human trafficking, the arms sales, the prosecution of dirty wars is just a turf war. And they do what they like without consequences, and there are only consequences for people that stumble into the turf, that dare to sell drugs where they sell drugs, or traffic people where they traffic people.
And so he sometimes gets it right? But it's the imprecision and it's the lack of progress in terms of understanding the consequences of the words that they say. And that's the remarkable part. They say all these words that belie an understanding that would then have consequences for their action, and they don't do anything but podcast. They don't say anything of consequence. They just say that what they see. I see birds, they're dead all over my backyard. I'm counting them. That's cool. Did you see the dead birds too? Yeah, they're everywhere. It's nuts. I had like 10 dead cardinals on my porch this morning. Cool. I swept them up, cleaned them away. It's nuts. The whole place is falling apart. If you actually saw and believed that the ecosystem was collapsing so much that you had to sweep dead birds off of your porch every morning, wouldn't you take more action than sweeping up the dead birds? If you believe all the things that you're saying right now, wouldn't you do more than just podcast with Brett Weinstein?
It's not about right and wrong. It's about whether you have the impunity that comes with power.
Yes, and this puts us in a very uncomfortable spot. So let me just put a couple of concepts on the table that I'm juggling in this neighborhood. One of them, you and I will have talked probably multiple times about what I call Goliath. And you might remember that my definition for Goliath is the force that opposes all meaningful change. It allows change, but meaningful change is not allowed because you are at the pinnacle of power.
Now we're supposed to be working with his model of reality that includes something called Goliath, which is kind of as well defined as the ship in a bottle variable in his brother's theory of everything. And so he is conjuring something here, Goliath. Conjuring something that he's never going to bother to define. In fact, his definition of it has not changed. And so if you have a model with a couple moving parts, but you never make any progress in understanding those moving parts and whether they have other parts or a phenomenon underlying them, or they're an emergent property of something else, but you just keep saying there's two parts, it's complex systems, different than complicated systems. And then you say Goliath, and you say the health freedom movement, but these things remain, rise and resist, people over profits, truth over lies, and courage over fear. Occasionally a few specific details about what they believe, but then right back to rise and resist, people over profits, courage over fear, and truth over lies. These are frauds. They are performing a shitty script, and that's why this podcast, even at 1.5 speed, is a shitty podcast.
You have only to lose when things that are unpredictable are introduced. So Goliath is effectively a force that prevents that meaningful change, which has terrifying implications. But the predicament it puts us in is, I think you and I are both feeling that there is an amorphous something that manifests as crises, as different as,
an amorphous something that manifests as crises. But think about how aspecific and stupid that is in 2025. He is such a pathetic pseudo-intellectual. It's worth pitying him. You kind of have to wonder if this guy is actually this dumb. Actually this unsophisticated and unable to see through such a shitty script that he seems to have been provided. That he's not done any legwork on virology or any legwork on microbiology or any legwork on molecular biology in 6 years. as a posing biologist because his field is evolution and he works on complex systems. And no one can teach him anything about that. The only person that he knows who works on complex systems like that is Paul Cottrell.
A war in Ukraine and a spreading infection and emergency procedures that are deployed ostensibly to control it. Those two things are not alike in one regard. But in another regard, to the extent that they feel like they are either tools cut from whole cloth for Goliath's purpose or events that are co-opted by Goliath, it amounts to the same thing. It is the rules-based society that you and I thought that we lived in, a kind of illusion that is fed to our...
The rules-based society again, which I just, is he a history teacher? Is he a civics teacher? He seems to be a polymath in his own mind, but I assure you he's not.
Naive and hopeful parts in order to distract us from what is actually wielding power over our lives.
That's, I suppose, to some extent what I find most frightening, or if not frightening, most discombobulating. I would put it almost akin to, if you'd been in a decades-long marriage that you had every reason to believe was, happy and mutual and all of the rest of it, and then you were to find out that your spouse from before day one had been, maintaining a second family and had been, betraying you in every way imaginable. So that you think, so none of this was ever real? Because the depth of my...
None of what? See, this is the problem. What specifically don't you think was real? Because if you can't say that, then you're not offering an alternative explanation. You're not offering an alternative model for the history of the last 5 years, which is what they purport to be discussing. These two malevolent turds, these absolute abominations of grown men, pathetic intellectual frauds. They might as well, they'd be better off drinking whiskey and talking about what they know about whiskey, because at least they probably know something. Maybe one of them does.
Discombobulation is such that not only do I think that we don't live in a rules-based society and that we're under the thrall or the yoke of organised crime, I have no idea how long it's been going on. It may have always been going on, into periods of time to be measured in centuries, if not millennia. And so now...
So for millennia it's been going on. Oh no, it might be the Venetians. I'm going to give you a clue right now, you dipshits. Okay? Everybody out there who thinks that matters, the only people who matter are the people who are alive right now. Because we're the only people who can teach these kids the truth before we're dead. If this theater's been going on for 400 years, the only way that the theater is sustained is by the actors that are alive, promoting the books of the actors that are dead at best. So again, he's trying to make you feel overwhelmed. You're supposed to agree, wow, yeah, I know, it's so overwhelming. It's like so old that what could I possibly do? It's the DOD, so what could I possibly do? If the DOD is poisoning everybody on Earth and it's the Venetians who are running the DOD since before the inception of America, then what am I going to do?
I look out at what I took for reality and I think, was any of it ever real? And now I'm 58 years old and I think, have I just been tricked and duped and been behaving like a hapless patsy for the whole of my life?
If you believe that, then what's the logical thing to do? To podcast with Brett Weinstein? To take sponsors and read sponsorships? To ignore the old people that were murdered in the care homes and hospitals of Scotland, instead promote yourself and your wardrobe with your super stupid scarves that you threaded your ear... Oh.
That's what I find particularly alarming. You alluded to the Goliath thing. You immediately make me think of, there's a poem by Ted Hughes called Hawk Roosting, which I can't remember much of it verbatim, but it's basically the ruminations of a hawk holding onto a branch with its talons and telling itself that the way things are the way I want things to be, and it's in my power to keep things like this. That I am the apex predator, and I will not be displaced, because after all, who's going to do it? And I suppose that's the way that I think of, that would be my analogy for your Goliath. that there's just power in the talons, and it does what it does to perpetuate its status quo.
Okay, so again, it's power. It's an amorphous hawk. Do I have to go out back and look at it? That's one of the reasons why I got on late. I just want to give you a tip. Right now is a really good time to watch birds in North America and in Europe on the north side of the earth, because the babies are out right now and the babies are chasing around their parents. And so there's a lot of, how can I say it? There are a lot of bird calls out there that if you don't watch birds or haven't been watching birds since your grandma raised you, then you wouldn't be aware of how the bird calls change in the spring and early summer. But right now they're very different. And if you listen carefully, you can hear all these juvenile birds chirping back to their parents, calling for food or calling for mom's help, and it's very different than what was happening in the spring, and it'll be very different than what's happening after these babies are out of the nest and the next round starts. So in case you're need some encouragement to go outside, and you forgot, you can go outside. There's a good reason to go outside if you have any interest in seeing birds. If you just have to go outside to get fresh air, maybe it's not quite so motivating because you don't want to look across the street. But if you're going to look across the street into the trees, or look into your garden into the trees, it might be more appealing to you. Get outside, get into nature, and stop listening to Brett Weinstein at some point. Seriously, just trash this guy for the anti-intellectual, anti-patriot, anti-American, awful person that he is.
Well, I want to put a thought out there. I don't know whether, I feel like offering it as a kind of solace. Whether there's any solace in it or not, I'm not sure. But I have the sense that the world that you and I thought we lived in is not entirely fictional, but it's a layer. We are effectively allowed to live in a layer that does have some of this rules-based nature, or at least it did. And that, as you describe it, the crime from the point of view of the powerful something that lives above that strata is to compete with it in a zone that it has declared off limits, right? So I would use the analogy of currency. You and I deal with something called money. And that money is simultaneously an illusion and very real. You can buy remarkable things with it. You can place it in an investment and lose it all, and your capacity to do things in the world will be radically changed by the fate of your money.
I got a quick one for you. For all you math people out there, like Matt Crawford and Dodd, and Nick Hudson seems to be interested in math. I mean, applied mathematician is one of the 5 degrees that Jessica Rose has. So all the mathematicians out there, Steve Kirsch, that guy is super into numbers. I wonder if any of you can tell me why there is both a limit at casinos and also a minimum. I wonder if anybody can tell me why that is the case. I bet you can't. I bet you don't know why. And I didn't know why, but I'm learning all the time. Just a math problem for you. Why is there a limit, and why is there a minimum in a casino?
So it is real in this sense, but it is also the kind of thing that you cannot protect. You can put it in a bank that will monitor the quantity of it that you have with precision, and you can't prevent the central bankers from devaluing it. So it is simultaneously real and protected, and there are certain things you can say about its value. There are certain rules. Economists study the rules that affect its value. But there's a loophole where something about power renders it, to them, monopoly money. They have ways of effectively printing it that devalue the money that's locked behind a vault door in the reality we live in. And so the point is, it would be wrong to say money isn't real. And it would be wrong to imagine that it is the object whose value is naturally defined by forces that we study scientifically. It is both things. It's both a fiction and a reality at the same time.
I would say it's a perfect analogy. I think a lot about money, not for the obvious reason, because I don't have any and I want some. I think about it as a useful analogy often, because a currency is a circulating security, which is, for most of us, it's bits of paper, or at least a number on a statement on your phone or in hard copy. And it works, or it worked traditionally because it was a security in as much as it was one step removed from something of actual value. So notionally, you could redeem it in the form of gold or whatever. Obviously, those days are long gone, but nonetheless, it's still a circulating security. It's one step removed from something of value, from proof of work. But the reason that it works so well as an analogy for what we're talking about is that it's fundamentally about confidence. You know, you and I have to accept that the $50 bill or the £100 note or whatever means the same thing. You know, we place the same value upon it.
So
and
look
as
at
long
how
as we do that,
look at how awful they are at using this analogy, and how and listen to how easy it would be to use this analogy better. Because if money is fiat, and the fiat only comes from them, it's very similar to how, you know, you either have cash or you have digital, and then digital, you don't really know what's going on anymore. It's a complete illusion. You'd rather have paper newspapers that are printed and distributed and read than you would rather have mobile phones with infinitely many anonymous accounts and infinite actors providing what appears to be the world in your at your fingertips, when in reality it's just a bunch of corrupt information drowning out anything useful. You know, like a bunch of corrupt money drowning out all of the money in your pocket, so that all of the communication that you might usefully have on social media is overwhelmingly dominated by bullshit and bullshitters on scripts provided by them. Instead, I don't know what they're using this analogy for. I don't know what they mean with the currency thing, and that it's a commodity or a certificate or a whatever. They still haven't really gotten anywhere. They've made it more complicated to understand that the world is fraudulent.
we can transact usefully and happily, and we can trust one another that when I give you this, you know what you've got in the form of that note. And I think where I actually find optimism, actually, because I endeavour not, I have a tendency more and more to be bleak, and I try not to be, and I try to find optimism. I think that the Ponzi scheme of the currency is on the point of collapse. And likewise, I think that it's no bad thing if the Ponzi scheme of our reality is allowed to collapse as well. Because what's real always was, always is, and always will be real. All the things of value in the world, and the proof of work, and the gold, and the crops, and the skills, and the knowledge are all still, everything that ever was on the planet is still here, as this blue marble hurtles through infinity. We've had an illusion placed over it. And if that illusion is no longer something that we can trust, if that is a debased currency, well, we're better off without it. If it's finally gone from being worth 100% to worth 1% and soon to be 0% of its cover price, then that might be no bad thing, because you don't want to deal with a Ponzi scheme indefinitely.
Wow, it sounds like he sounds like he's ready for collapse. He's all about it. Might as well flush it down the toilet and punish nobody. Why? Who are we going to punish? Who's responsible for it? Who are we going to hold accountable if it was 400 years ago already people were doing it? Those people are ultimately responsible.
And it might be that the value of pulling the Band-Aid off is greater than the pain. But I have a concern. I think what you've said is logically true, but past its sell-by date, in the sense that, let's say that we run your experiment in a town 300 years ago, where let's say that the town exists in some sort of a nation that destroys its own currency through reckless policy or corruption. Well, the townspeople who discover that the notes that they were using in exchange have gone from being...
Are we going to pretend that we don't ever have... This has never happened anywhere before? Is this monster fraud going to try and tell a historic antidote when there are actual historic examples in Dutch history, Argentinian history, Venezuelan history, German history? What in the nine hells is this guy doing other than obfuscating any truth that might be available? This is the worst. It's just awful. And the reason why we are covering it is because this is an American who's being put in front of anybody that will watch him, and therefore is a threat to our children, is a threat to our college kids, is a threat to anybody who can tolerate him, because he is a scripted liar on a script provided by Robert Malone and Kevin McKernan. if at all, anymore. As bad as he is, it could be that he's been let loose, and this is a moron out of control.
A circulating security, as you put it, to a circulating insecurity, may at some point be better off just realizing, you know what, forget those things. You know, I'm a blacksmith and I make these tools, and you raise meat and you need these tools, and we can go back to doing this in some way where there's no mystery about what the exchange involves.
So I wonder what Brett's gonna offer in that exchange. Will he fix somebody's motorcycle? Will he teach anybody's kids? Is he going to offer something? What are his services that this little man can offer? I bet he can't even lift his own body weight. Give me a break.
False. Now, run that scenario again with a modern American or British town chosen at random. Well, it doesn't have all of the elements necessary for life. It may grow nothing. It may only grow things and not be able to manufacture the tools with which to do the growing. And so the problem is, does a collapse become so catastrophic that even your point about it returning us to some kind of reason isn't allowed? It isn't possible for that to happen because the peril is so great in the getting from A to B.
It confronts us with, or it asks us to confront
what is getting from A to B in their mind. I think getting from A to B means that after society collapse, how long does it take for all the zombies to die? How long does it take for all the useless eaters to kill themselves or each other? This is actually what they're talking about here. They are contemplating what's going to happen when the useless eaters' system of compliance and system of subservience and system of acquiescence is gone. Will the internet be enough to entertain them until they starve or die of something else? These are all questions that they're asking. That's one of the reasons why that coward moved to an island. That's one of the reasons why these very rich people have houses on different places like New Zealand and Hawaii. Because they understand and are anticipating a societal collapse. And they probably are putting people in place right now to make sure that that collapse is catastrophic and violent, so that they can produce solutions to that catastrophic violence. They're already testing that shit all around the United States, and that's what you probably saw in LA already. And they'll do it elsewhere as long as their actors are put on social media and people use social media skillfully to try and figure out what's going on. But social media could also be their downfall. But it will require manual sharing and manual use of social media, going only where you want to go, seeing only what you want to see, and sharing only what you want to share. That's why I've established a PeerTube channel and a soapbox, because those have no algorithms. Those are open, federated, and free. You can download things and watch them on your own. You can download things and send them to other people. You can download my videos and make your own YouTube channel, your own Rumble channel, your own BitChute channel, your own Spotify podcast. And I encourage you to do it.
I think we mean by evolution. You know, I do mean as organisms or so. I'm not going to stray into your biological territory unwittingly, but evolution societally, we call it progress. But I think we have to confront what we've actually accepted and what we've done. You know, science and technology and so on have gifted us lives of comparative ease compared to the lives of people living in even the recent past. You know, we've all got the wisdom of the ages in our pockets. And, you know, we have convenience and we have everything.
The wisdom of the ages in our pockets. You see, that's bullshit. We have nothing of the sort.
A click away, but in terms of progress, we're all stupid and without skills. Most people don't know anything unless they look it up. And even at that, you have to know a certain amount to know what to look up. And we don't have any skills. I mean, nobody could fix a lawnmower, far less their car. People can't make clothes to clothe them.
See who they're talking about? They're talking about people and we, because these are exactly that kind of man. He's never fixed anything himself, never got his hands dirty, maybe never even dug a hole. Has he had calluses on his hands? Ever had any blisters from working with a tool? like a shovel or a pick or maybe a bush axe? Do they even know the shape of a bush axe? Do they know what that is even? Have they ever done a job where they needed steel toe shoes? Like I said before, have they ever baled hay? Have they ever worked in the barn or on the wagon? These people are not Americans. They're not UK people. They're posers. These are not commoners. These are not one of us. They are auditioning to be one of them. And that's why they don't know how we live. They don't know how we grew up. And they know nothing about the country we're trying to restore. Brett knows nothing about the country we're trying to restore. The last time that guy was even close to what I would call an American was when his dad bought him a house in Ann Arbor, Michigan, so that he could go to the University of Michigan as an undergrad. And so that's why I have, ow, dang it, that didn't work, my Michigan shorts on. I got Michigan shorts on because I got shorts for every one of these meddlers for my show. And once I start shooting on the basketball court and doing shows about them on the basketball court, I'll be wearing shorts that match the clown that I'm talking about. So in this case, I've got shorts from the University of Michigan on because that clown, when he was a kid, went to the University of Michigan, where he met Heather, where his dad bought him a house. The dad that worked with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to update the FDA, despite Estes Kefauver's best try to make it better. Yeah, that guy.
Nakedness, people can't hunt.
I'm coming for them all.
You know, we've become an interesting question. I definitely think as well that we've passed the point where you used to be able to say, well, medicine has given us longer, healthier lives. I think we've even passed the tipping point on that one. I think we're living shorter lives. We're certainly unhealthier, even if they're keeping us alive for 70, 80, 90 years.
Even if we're living longer, though.
We're less, I think, cumulatively, for all of the aforementioned reasons, we're less alive than we used to be.
Yeah, I agree. And we are degrading the quality of our lives through processes that are effectively automated.
So it's all our fault. We are doing it. We are less alive than ever is an enchantment. It's demoralizing the people that listen to this. And it's also an agreement between these two guys. Yeah, it's really true. It's really true. We suck. People suck. The world sucks.
Dramatic. And that concerns me greatly. That, for example, the enlightened perspective these days seems to be that the population bloom and doomers were wrong, which they were, and that actually there's no population problem at all, and that the more the better.
So we're going to skip this part because we talked about this one already.
Where Asia, the populations in some instances are falling faster than a piano out of a window.
Sure.
So is population pressure really the burgeoning problem in the medium-term future? Is it not the loss of population?
And so now I just want to show you that it's a little bit further.
Exceptions to that.
At the quality of life on planet Earth, and we got life. That's a really good analogy for birth control and what it does to human. That it has. I'm very much in favor of birth control in terms of what it has accomplished, but it has also destroyed the fundamental logic of being a person.
What did it accomplish?
And by doing so,
what did it accomplish? And it has inverted the fundamental logic of being a human. Birth control has inverted the fundamental logic of what it means to be human, but he's not going to explain it. Further along in this interview, they're going to debate about whether Nick Hudson is a good guy or not, but this one is especially awful. Because what did birth control accomplish other than creating that temporary bump, that anticipated rise in all-cause mortality that was caused after World War II, that we needed to get in control of, that we did get in control of by writing books like this and by promoting birth control, which created an anticipated temporary rise in all-cause mortality that they managed with murder and lies and called a pandemic. And this guy is employed to make sure that no one ever realizes that. That other guy is employed in the UK to make sure that no one ever realizes that. He's in Scotland with one of the worst population pyramid managing crimes on earth.
it has created exactly the kind of chaos in which people do not understand that the future and getting into it is the entire point of the exercise. People have become solipsistic, they've become narcissistic, they have become confused about the centrality.
It's by design. It's because of social media. Social media did that. Nothing else. This guy is a malevolent traitor to our grandchildren. I'm going to just go forward.
Because you're doing the things you do, driving the cars you drive, plumbing exams that my parents' generation...
That's the domain that matters. So it used to be that people enjoyed sport. This is an ancient thing.
Did you see him? He's looking at a script.
Built to enjoy sport. But the idea that somebody who's into sport went from somebody who plays the sport to somebody who watches the sport and follows it on a screen, we have gone from producing sport to consuming it. And yet it feels, oh, he's really into football, right? That sounds like the same person, but it is in fact the inverse activity, producing versus consuming. People used to make music. The number of people who now make music is very small. What everybody else does is they consume music. Music used to be universal. Everybody in your tribe would gather and you would raise your voices together. And the songs were living entities that went on and changed over time.
It's funny because I'm a scientist who did science. I'm a musician who made music. I'm a kite flyer who's also built them. I'm a motorcycle rider who's also repaired them and maintained them. It's interesting because he's describing himself as part of this sad human race and all the attributes that he shows, because since he supposedly got fired or lost his job and was paid $500,000, what has he done? What has he learned? How much progress has he made in fighting Goliath? And you can now see him plain as day as the fraud that he is. Brett Weinstein is such a fraud that in a few minutes these two guys are going to discuss whether Nick Hudson is smart enough, is clear enough. The same guy, of course, that of course would plug me as somebody to follow or to understand or something like that. I got to go to the gym. This timing is a little bad, so I don't have a play out. We're not going to be able to do music. I need to get on even earlier. I don't see any other way to do it. I think I'm going to have to move the starting time even earlier. I need to get back to 10:10 or something like that. So I apologize for ending so abruptly. I'm not going to watch the rest of this. I'm frustrated because it's so easy to dissect. It's kind of painful. But assure you that in a few minutes, they're going to talk about Nick Hudson. And actually, it's the Coast guy who says, there's a guy that you might know, Nick Hudson. And then Brett says, well, Nick Hudson doesn't really understand what complex is versus complicated. And so let me explain complex systems versus complicated systems. And it is so awful. It is so pseudo-intellectual and so pathetic that it made me sad. It made me sad for him. It made me pity him, but it also made me sad for either social media being so hyper effective that when given few alternatives, people will actually watch him, or even worse, that we have so acquiesced to using social media that we've become so undiscerning with our time that actually a lot of people don't mind listening to this guy, which is a very, very depressing idea. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Gigaohm Biological. It's a high-resistance, low-noise information brief brought to you by a biologist. I'm going to be back on tomorrow at around 10:10, as early as possible so that I can get enough time to really put a show together. This is 1:37. It should be around 2 hours. That's the reason why it feels like I'm cutting it short. There was a few more things they were going to say, and then I could have done a little music break and everything. I'll figure it out, I promise, and I will definitely be here again tomorrow. Thanks for being here. My voice feels better than it did yesterday, so, there's something to be optimistic about. I definitely can breathe better than I could breathe yesterday. So I had a swollen throat. Don't worry about it. It's not the same. It's not the same as that lump that came out a couple years ago that nobody cares about. Thanks for being here. See you soon.